wanted to see me, Mr. Arch?
Yes, come sit, Miss Audrey. You've been an employee of the month for quite a bit now. I have heard you have been working overtime in the animation department as well.
Yes, sir, I have.
Please, call me Nathan. After seeing your dedication to the studio, I am giving you an offer. You know of my old friend, Mr. Drew, yes?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you understand how involved we are with the restoration of his work. Producing his cartoons and preserving his legacy is important to us.
I've heard plenty to know that the studio has a film in the works about him, but it's not my department, so that's all I know.
Yes, what you may not know is that a part of it involves excerpts from my old friend's personal memoir. I am offering you the job of narrating it for a part of the film. I feel you have the best understanding of the work that goes into bringing his creations to life.
Oh.
Would you be willing to read a few pages? I would like to hear his work in your words.
Oh, of course.
I cannot talk of either the big idea or putting the right team together without talking about Henry Stein. Though his short-lived impact on Joey Drew Studios did not live up to expectations, I would not call my choice to partner with him in establishing the studio, nor have him head up a creative, as a mistake. Unlike my decision to not have a proper music department for a few years, which I will discuss anon, Henry never held us back. His presence was helpful, I can happily admit, but his absence even more so. Not having him at the studio ended up being one of the best things that could have happened to it. Of course, the funny thing is, I couldn't have not had him without having him in the first place. Just like you can't appreciate the light if you haven't spent time in the dark, so too does a person's absence become clear only if he has been around. So even though his time at the studio was short, I do feel a need to talk about him now, and especially because the company went through a huge shift from when I had started to a mere 2 years later when I took over full creative control and hired Mr. Morris as the head of the art department, and Sammy Lawrence as head of music. What it became then was magic. But we all need to start somewhere, and experimentation is how all inventions begin. I learned this at the lab, of course. And, in this case, it all began at an amateur art show. So it was that I attended the art show because of Abby, not Henry. She wasn't the only artist being hosted that night, and while I always had such a great affinity for her, heck, I hired her as an artist and she works for me to this day, she was still playing along with her version of an impressionistic style. It never quite resonated the same way the actual impressionists did. The one thing that did work for her, though, was her constant dark undertones, the feeling of something sinister under the surface in all of her paintings. Her work certainly stood out among its peers, and it definitely did that night. And when I kissed her on each cheek after a warm hello, I had to tell her as much.
Oh, Joey, you shouldn't say those kinds of things.
But you agree.
Well, of course I do, but you still shouldn't say those kinds of things. Hey, Joey, would you like to see Henry's work? Come on, you snob. I think you might actually like his work. You always talk about your desire to communicate with the world.
Not exactly. Hey, I want to imitate it and show it back to the world.
Same thing.
She deposited me in front of a wall of pen drawings. Compared with the brightness of the watercolors next to them, the unnecessary randomness of the installation pieces, and the creepiness of Abby's oils, it was, for want of a better word, uninspiring. I saw nothing to impress me, and definitely nothing that communicated with the world, as she put it. What am I looking at?
Aren't they clever?
I leaned in to examine them closer. I have to admit, I have no memory of what I looked at that evening. I know there were cartoon drawings that I saw of various characters. I do recall a few were a little funny, but I do know they clarified what she'd meant about communication. They were caricatures of day-to-day people. Maybe there was a butcher in there, though I might just be confusing it with my own creation, the Butcher Gang. They reminded me of comics from the papers. Little stories about people. People being people. That was the moment. That was it. Right there. The match against the flint. The flame.
Who was Henry?
He was the co-founder of Drew's old studio. As his friend, I know that Henry's departure was a great upheaval for him, and a great personal betrayal. Joey never truly forgave Henry, and I don't think he should have felt obligated to.
Wow. So, how was that?
Absolutely perfect.